This new AI will not answer a single one of your questions itself. Ask it anything, and it does not even try. Instead, it turns around, quietly picks a team of other AIs, hands out the work, checks what they bring back, and stitches the best answer together. It is a manager, not a worker, a conductor, not a musician. It is called Fugu. It just launched out of Tokyo on June 22nd, 2026, from one of the people who literally helped invent the technology inside ChatGPT, and the lab behind it makes a claim that sounds impossible. This one model, which builds no intelligence of its own, can stand shoulder to shoulder with the best AI on the planet, just by being the smartest one in the room at telling everyone else what to do. So how does an AI that refuses to think for you end up matching the ones that do? Let me show you, because the idea underneath it might be where all of this is heading next. To get why this matters, look at the race everyone else is running. For 3 years, the whole AI industry has chased the same prize. Build one model, make it bigger, feed it more of the internet, burn more electricity, then do it all again. And it worked, right up until the top models quietly caught up to one another. Today, the very best ones cluster within a few points on almost every benchmark. The strongest models in the world now answer hard questions at roughly the same level. And when the leaders become nearly interchangeable, being the biggest stops being the win. That is the opening a small Tokyo lab called Sakana AI just walked through. On June 22nd, 2026, they shipped a system named Fugu, and Fugu is not a frontier model at all. It is a model whose entire job is to command other models. You send one request to a single ordinary-looking endpoint, the same kind of connection your apps already use to talk to ChatGPT. And behind that one door, Fugu decides who should actually do the work. To you, it looks and feels like talking to one model. Underneath, it is quietly running a team. Sakana's own tagline for it is, one model to command them all. And that name is doing a lot of work, because the promise is exactly that. Not one model to rule you, but one model to coordinate all the others. So how does a model boss around other models? Sakana describes a clean 4-step loop you can hold in your head. Select, delegate, verify, synthesize. First it selects. It reads your request and chooses which models to pull in from a swappable pool of AIs. Then it delegates. It breaks the task into pieces and hands them out in roles, almost like staffing a project. Sakana's research describes casting models into parts. One becomes the thinker, planning the approach. Others are workers, doing the heavy lifting. Another is the verifier, whose only job is to check the answers. Then Fugu itself verifies that work, catching mistakes before they ever reach you. And finally, it synthesizes, weaving the strongest pieces into one clean result. Here is the part that makes it more than a fancy menu of models. This routing is learned. Sakana says they trained Fugu to know when to delegate, which model to trust for what, and how to combine the answers, rather than someone hand-coding a giant if this then that rulebook. According to reporting, the orchestrator at the center is itself a relatively small model that learned this skill through trial and error. In other words, the conducting itself is the intelligence. The talent is not in any one musician. It is in the baton. Now for the strangest detail, the one that makes people lean in, Fugu can call copies of itself. When a problem is genuinely hard, Sakana says Fugu can spin up instances of itself inside its own pool. Clones that read each other's work, argue, and double-check the result, all to think harder on a tough question, with no retraining required. An AI that calls itself for backup. And it comes in 2 tiers that ride the exact same interface, so you never change how you connect. There is a fast, everyday tier, simply called Fugu, tuned for quick coding and chat. And a deeper one, Fugu Ultra, built to grind through hard, multi-step problems, the kind early users pointed at things like research, security testing, and reproducing scientific papers. One beta engineer described aiming Ultra at a code review and watching it flag more than 20 issues, where his usual tool surfaced about 3. Same task, same code. The difference was a swarm of checked, coordinated AIs instead of a single tool working alone. And because they share one interface, you never have to think about any of it. You ask once. Fugu decides, behind the scenes, whether your request needs a quick answer or the full deep team, and how many copies of itself to wake up to get it right. Which brings us to the claim that makes people stop scrolling. Sakana reports that Fugu Ultra stands shoulder to shoulder with the absolute frontier, with elite models like Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos Preview, without building any of that frontier itself. According to Sakana's own numbers, Ultra scores about 74 on SWE-Bench Pro, a hard real-world software engineering test, around 95 on GPQA Diamond, a brutal set of graduate-level science questions, and in the low 90s on a leading live coding benchmark. And remember, it reaches those heights not by training a genius, but by orchestrating cheaper, accessible models you have already heard of. Names like Opus 4.8, GPT 5.5, and Gemini 3.1 Pro. On their own, Sakana's charts put each of those below Ultra's combined score. So the team that loses to no single one of them beats them all together once a smart conductor decides who does what. The pitch in one line: you do not have to be the smartest model in the room. You just have to be the smartest at running the room. And it closes off the obvious worry, too. Running a whole team of models, you would think, multiplies your bill. Sakana says no. You pay a single rate based on the top-tier model involved, not a stacked fee for every agent in the swarm. There is a simple subscription ladder, $20, $100, and $200 a month, with every tier including both the fast Fugu and the deep Ultra, and pay-as-you-go pricing for anyone who would rather build it straight into their own software. So who builds something like this? This comes from a deliberately tiny lab, around 20 people, in Tokyo, and its chief technology officer is Llion Jones, one of the 8 co-authors of the 2017 paper, Attention is All You Need. That is the paper that introduced the transformer, the architecture sitting underneath basically every modern AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of it. So sit with that. One of the people who helped invent the engine inside all modern AI is now building the thing that sits on top and commands those engines. And here is the twist that makes it click. Jones has openly said he is, in his words, absolutely sick of transformers, and he left Google to go chase the next idea. That idea is hiding in the company's name. Sakana is simply Japanese for fish, chosen because a school of fish, thousands of simple creatures moving as one, is exactly how these founders think intelligence should work. Many small, specialized models swimming together instead of one giant brain. Fugu, fittingly, is the Japanese word for pufferfish, and this is not a one-off product. For 2 years, Sakana has been building toward it. They once merged a 7 billion parameter model out of existing open ones, no fresh training, and it beat far larger models. They built a system that runs the scientific method on its own. They got rival labs models to cooperate on the same puzzle. Fugu is where all of that points. Co-founded alongside Jones by Chief Executive David Ha, a former Google Brain researcher, and Chairman Ren Ito, a former Japanese diplomat, and backed by investors from NVIDIA to Japan's biggest banks. Sakana is now the country's most valuable AI startup, valued at $2.65 billion. Now step back, because Fugu is really a bet on where AI goes from here. For years, getting better meant building a bigger model. Fugu argues the next frontier is not size, it is coordination. Knowing which expert to call, and exactly when to call it. It is the same instinct that runs a great team. The smartest person in the room is rarely the one doing every job. It is the one who knows exactly who to hand each job to. And there is a reason that argument lands right now, in this moment. Recently, some of the strongest AI models in the world got export controlled, restricted on national security grounds, suddenly out of reach for whole regions overnight. And if your software happened to be wired to one of those models, it simply stopped working. Sakana's design is built for precisely that. Because Fugu's pool of models is swappable, if one gets cut off, it can quietly reroute the work to another with no change to your code. Sakana's chief executive, David Ha, frames leaning on a single company's AI for critical systems, for finance, infrastructure, or government, as a real vulnerability, in his words, no longer hypothetical. So Fugu turns resilience itself into the product, and it reframes the whole story. AI stops being only a race for the single smartest model and becomes a question every country and company is quietly starting to ask. If you cannot count on someone else's best model always being there, can you get to the top anyway, just by brilliantly orchestrating the ones you can actually reach? Sakana's whole bet is that the answer is yes. So that is Fugu. Not another giant brain, but a conductor. A model that answers nothing itself and instead commands a whole school of other AIs to answer it together. Select, delegate, verify, synthesize, and when the problem gets hard, it can even call copies of itself to think it through. It is a genuinely different picture of what the most powerful AI of the next few years might even look like. Less one towering monster model, and more a swarm with a brilliant manager out front. Whether Sakana's school of fish really can keep pace with the giants, the coming months will tell. But the idea is too interesting to look away from. So here is my question for you. Bigger brain or smarter swarm, which one actually wins in the end? Tell me in the comments, I read them. And if you want the next big AI story explained in plain English before everyone else is even talking about it, subscribe, because breaking these down clearly is the whole point of this channel. Hit like, share this with the one friend who would find it as wild as you did, and I will see you in the next one.